Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's live stream. We do have a special guest from over the Atlantic a little bit later, but we've got quite a few things to cover before we go to our special guest. Quite a few things been in the news and things we're experiencing in the family party. You might have seen on social media, I had a lunch and during lunch with a Glasgow cabbie, Steph Shaw, a few days ago. We were hatching a plot or two. I won't give away too much about those, but watch this space. We've got some ideas for raising the issues that we're both concerned about in Glasgow in particular and around Scotland more widely. So we've got a couple of ideas for striking activities, let me say. So wait and see what we've got up our sleeve there. Those of you who are followers of us on Instagram, you may have noticed our Instagram account has dematerialized. It's completely disappeared. We're in the process of trying to find out what's going on there to see if that can be reinstated. But at the moment, it looks like Instagram have just deleted our account. Okay, Neil spent a lot of time building that up. We're on about 700. Well, we haven't put a huge amount of effort into Instagram over the years, but just recently, the last few months, Neil's been working on it quite hard. So we're at about 700, but it looks like, I'd say, it's just been deleted by Instagram, no doubt, because they don't like what we say. They don't like what we say. So politics in Scotland, Meta, Facebook, Instagram, that business, it looks like at the moment that they've decided to interfere in the democratic process by deleting our Instagram account. So they provide an Instagram account for every other political party, but not one for us. So we're not absolutely certain of this. We need to give this a little while just to see if we get any sense out of them. In our appeals trying to contact them, which is very difficult. So it may be that we get somewhere with them and it's reinstated. It may be that happens. But at the moment, that's not looking optimistic at all. So watch this space. And if we have been deleted, I've got a couple of ideas of ways to take that forward. But we'll wait and see that we're certain. In the recent past as well, we had Facebook hiding our page. So if you search for Scottish Family Party on Facebook, just didn't come up. That seems to be fixed now. That seems to be okay. YouTube took down a video that I made about, I better not say the words because they might delete this, about chimpanzee sickness and who it was affecting and what might be useful advice in avoiding contracting said illness. They took down that video as hate speech. So we're having a bit of social media problems recently. But if you want to avoid these problems, basically, we could be deleted from any platform at any time. So do sign up for our newsletter to make sure that you stay in contact with us. Do sign up for the newsletter. Having said that, MailChimp sometimes deletes subscribers as well. They say people have unsubscribed, and they say they actually haven't. I've said before, I haven't. One of the people they said unsubscribed was me. And I hadn't unsubscribed, obviously. So what's going on there as well, we do not know. So we have challenges on all fronts. But that's what we expect. That's the world we live in. And we're undeterred, press on, regardless. At the moment, the pro-abortion campaigners just seem to have a direct link into the media in Scotland, to TV, BBC, STV, all the newspapers, just seems to be a direct contact. It's as though all the media send a message every day to the pro-abortion campaigners and say, what stories would you like us to run today? It really does seem like that. Today there were a couple of gentlemen outside an abortion clinic in Glasgow with their, hard-hitting, provocative placards, I would say, apparently with a loud hailer as well. To be honest, that's not an approach I would take personally. But on the other hand, what they're doing is perfectly within the law. So hysterical responses to that. There have been articles about the fact that women in Scotland have to travel to England to get late-term abortions. It's a pretty horrific procedure. But the nature of the procedure, what actually goes on, no mention of that at all. That's totally ignored. The only issue is these people are going to have to, having to go on a long train journey to get it done. That's the real outrage. That's the thing that's really shameful. And again, totally unchallenged in the articles I've seen. But the good thing here is that the pro-life issue is obviously climbing up the agenda. It's obviously climbing up the agenda pretty fast. So that's a good thing for us. What else has been going on? It is Pride Month in schools. Some teachers, some pupils have been sending us things. I put a poster on Facebook. And this poster had been circulated to all the staff in the school, and the staff were encouraged, why don't you fill this poster in, put it up on your wall, and you filled in your pronouns. In other words, saying to staff, please endorse the whole idea of transgender ideology, of changing gender, of making up your own pronouns, choosing your own pronouns. Please endorse this idea by completing this poster and putting it on your wall. And you're asked to do that by the head teacher. So if you're interested in your career, if you want to go far in that school, probably worth getting that poster up on the wall. If you're a real activist, if you're a campaigner, if you absolutely believe in that ideology, put that poster on your wall. If you're a teacher who thinks, I don't really agree with this, I don't think it's right, well, bad luck. You're going to feel as if you're under a bit of pressure. You're going to feel this counting against you. That's the way it goes. Same for the pupils as well. Now, I was out over tea time at an event in Glasgow where there were 3 academics speaking about gender ideology in schools from a critical perspective. It was very good, actually. 3 speakers. One of them was a sort of feminist teacher at the Murray House School of Education. I mean, as far as her feminism went, I think I would disagree with her pretty dramatically. But when it came to the gender ideology point, she was spot on. There was the lady from Transgender Trend, and also another academic from Edinburgh University who challenged, she was basically saying gender ideology in schools is harming children. And she'd been put through all sorts of disciplinary processes at work. But to be honest, she seemed like it was still quite a raw nerve for her. She'd been quite upset by that, quite traumatized by the whole experience. But she was saying, she thinks it's the right thing to do to speak out for the sake of the children. And that's what she would continue to do. I mean, the thought did cross my mind about all the churches in Scotland that say nothing. The church leaders who say, oh, it's not for us to speak about these things. It'd be bad for our image. Doesn't really fit in with our marketing strategy at the moment to be objecting to the corruption and endangering of children in schools. Whereas these 3 ladies were not Christians. Whereas these people who are not Christians are on the front line, standing up for what's right, trying to protect children. And it just made me think, really some churches should be ashamed of themselves, that they're on the sidelines while it's other people who are actually fighting for our children, not the way it's supposed to be. And then what else came out from it? I mean, there was the same. I mean, the 3 ladies there, they all seem to be totally on board for LGB sort of ideology, and they all seem totally on board for feminist ideology, but they just wanted to draw a line at the transgender ideology. And I thought, well, where did transgender ideology come from? Did it not come from the idea that, men and women, doesn't really matter which one's which, getting married, you don't really need a man and a woman, 2 men, 2 women, doesn't matter who's a man, doesn't matter who's a woman. Isn't that a step along the line towards, it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, you can choose. It sort of is, isn't it? With feminism as well, didn't they invent the idea that sex and gender are different things? Didn't that idea develop within feminist thought? I think it did. So I think the ideas that laid the groundwork for transgender ideology did come from the LGB and feminist movements. Now, it would be perfectly reasonable for an LGBT campaigner or a feminist to say, okay, fair enough, but this is different. We disagree with this step that they've made here. Okay, but still, that is the groundwork. That's the foundation that's been built on to get to transgender ideology. A couple of other things from this lecture I've just been to. I asked a question. I said, one of the ladies was saying, instead of the Scottish government's guidance that says, if a boy says he thinks he's a girl, you say, well done for discovering your true self. She was saying, what would be better is to say, let's explore what makes you think like this. And if you can try and find out what the issue is, then hopefully, you could become happy in your actual sex. And I said, are you concerned that type of conversation will be illegal if the conversion therapy ban goes through the Scottish Parliament, as it's looking like it's doing? That's the direction it's heading in. And all 3 of the panelists said they're extremely concerned about that, which was good. The conversation then went on to, what can you do about it? And they got into, go and see the head teacher, try and have a conversation with the school, and try and make friends with them, which is all fine. It's all fine. You can imagine you only get one question of these things. You imagine what I would have liked to have said if I'd have got another chance to speak. I'd have said, stop voting for it. Stop voting for it. If you voted for any of the parties in the Scottish Parliament, this is what you voted for. You may say, oh, the Conservatives, they don't go along with it. Was that in their manifesto for the council elections? Was that in their manifesto? Because education is under the control of the councils. Do the Conservatives put in their manifesto no more gender ideology in schools? No. The Conservatives didn't oppose it. So I wanted to say that there's no point complaining or campaigning if you're going to keep voting for the parties that say they're going to carry on doing the same thing. So I didn't get a chance to say that, but I would have done had the chance of being there. Right, just a passing as well. Just before the live stream started, I just had an email coming in. Someone had just joined the family party. Which is great. If you're not a member of the party, do join. Do go to our website and sign up. We rely on our members to do what we're doing and to keep growing and fighting elections and promoting ourselves in various ways. So do go and join. We'd love to have you aboard. Right, another quick article from the Telegraph. SNP's alcohol unit price policy just drove drinkers to spend less on food. Now, this is the SNP like tinkering with the price of alcohol, making there a minimum price per unit. The idea being it was going to reduce problematic alcohol use. So the thing is, they'll never approach something from the point of view of personal responsibility, willpower, morality, and that's just totally out of order. You just got to tweak the system, and that will solve the problem. But it hasn't. I mean, it seems like in some cases it's made it worse. But our policy with regard to alcohol is, you hear politicians saying Scotland's, needs a new relationship with alcohol. We need a new attitude, but they'll never say what it is. They'll never say what it is. Our policy is that the change needs to be that the social acceptability of drunkenness needs to be challenged. Drinking drunk needs to be seen as something controversial, or to use a terrible, terrible word that is very unpopular, needs to be stigmatized. Okay, people should feel embarrassed at saying that they were drinking irresponsibly. We think that will create a healthier attitude towards alcohol in Scotland. Right, one last thing before I turn to our special guest. Let's have a look at a few comments that's streaming in on YouTube. Right, hello, Toby. Cat in the background looks very focused. He does, doesn't he? He's got very realistic eyes. There's that cat. Yeah. LGTV. I don't know what that is. Anyway, but it sounds as if it's a joke, but I don't get it. I don't know what LGTV is. Right. Interesting question. Doubling maternity leave pay. The lowest in Europe. We don't have a policy about maternity leave pay, but we do have a policy on transferable tax allowance, which would mean if, for example, mum was at home with newborn kids, then dad would be getting a lot more of his salary if mum wasn't earning. So that would aid the income of mums while they're on maternity leave. But the level of maternity leave pay, we haven't looked at. Maybe we could consider that. So thanks for that. We will look into that. Right, one last thing. I've seen a few emails this week of a family in Scotland who contacted their local MSP when they became aware of the sex education that their children were receiving. It was interesting. The MSP, SNP, Richard Lockhead, MSP. So he replied, classic sort of reply you get from an MSP. Basically, he's not interested. He's basically saying, look, you're worrying about nothing. It's absolutely fine. But they always try and make it sound like they're on your side. Yeah, thank you for raising your concern. I'm sorry to hear that you're not happy with what's going on. I'm aware that different people have different views and all this sort of thing. I'll pass it on to the cabinet secretary. All that sort of thing. All designed to make the family think, oh yeah, he's on our side. He's trying to pass on what we say. He's trying to represent us. That's really good, isn't it? But at the end of the day, it's not. It's not on your side. He's not on your side. He actually thinks you're wrong. He thinks that there's nothing to worry about. And he's basically saying what the SNP is teaching in schools, that's right, and it's going to carry on that way. Because he doesn't want you to think, oh, right, it's not going to vote for the SNP anymore. He wants you to feel that you're part of the family, and he's sort of on your side, even though obviously he isn't. And also a reply from the MSP, Emma Roddick, who was much more straightforward. She basically said, right, there's nothing wrong with the sex education resources. So I'm not going to try and change them at all. That's the Emma Roddick who just lied through her teeth about the prayer vigils outside abortion clinics. So it's interesting to see MSPs. I sometimes think they're at their cleverest when they're responding to people contacting them with concerns. I mean, listen to some of them in the committee rooms, and the level of understanding is perhaps not as high as it might be. When you hear them replying to constituents, then, as I say, every ounce of brain power goes into just trying to sound as positive as you can without actually agreeing with the person, and recognizing what's going on, that what's going on in schools is wrong. Right, let's just have a look at one last question. Apologies for asking the question. That's fine. Would you promote adoption and support adoptive parents if you were in charge? Very definitely. We passed a new motion at our conference about adoption, about looking at ways we could sort of honor and celebrate adoptive parents and the institution of adoption, because it's extremely valuable. Also, this will be a small step, but part of abortion, pre-abortion counseling as well, should be to say, basically, we've got people queuing up to adopt newborn babies as well. Women should be aware of that when they're making the decision to have an abortion. Because the great thing with adoption, I mean, ideally, children should be brought up by their own mum and dad. That's the ideal. But if that's not possible for some reason, if something's gone wrong, then adoption improves the situation and makes it closer to the ideal, which is obviously what you want to do. Obviously what you do. So adoption is a fantastic thing. And let's say, well, I can't remember the words in our policies exactly, but we've passed some new policies about celebrating, honoring, and encouraging adoption. Our policy on gay couples adopting is that we give priority to man and a woman. Okay, children need a mum and a dad, so they would have priorities. That would be a major factor in adoption decisions. Now, of course, you could end up with a situation where the alternatives are a child goes to a gay couple or stays in a local authority care home. So so it's not an absolute rule, but it's saying we would give priority to heterosexual couples. So all things being equal, being a heterosexual couple, that would be a point in your favor in applying for adoption. Right, it is 18 minutes past 9. It is time to introduce our guest who until not too long ago lived in Inverness, but now lives in America. So let us meet Lee Marsha. Lee, thank you for joining us.
Hi there, how are you?
Very well, very well. And where are you? Whereabouts in the States are you?
Well, right now I am in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, but we live just outside of Nashville.
Right, okay, Nashville. Now that's sort of southeastish, isn't it?
Yes.
Would that be right?
Yes.
And Cape Cod, where's that?
Massachusetts. So it's 18 hours north.
Okay.
It's quite a drive. So we drive it. We should fly, but we take our little dog. So
right.
But
okay.
One thing I wanted to mention is my name is actually something else because I've had death threats. So what you think my last name is Marshar, it's actually Hardy. So just to give you an idea of the nature of what we're dealing with, that someone has to put their name, a different last name on.
So you're confident that there's no psychopaths watching tonight?
Positive. Yeah. Well, yes.
Oh, yeah. If you see some of the comments, you won't be so sure. So.
I know, right?
Everything.
Exactly.
So you're in Scotland. You're in Inverness until not too long ago.
Yeah.
Tell us about that. When was that?
Sorry?
When was that?
I think we arrived 2010, and I think we left around 2017.
Okay.
I think.
2017. Right. Okay. I mean, had you become aware of issues within education in Scotland?
I will say I didn't think Scotland was as bad as the United States, but I had always grown, well, not always, but a lot of times it's not until you have a child that you start thinking about education. And before that, it's really not on your mind, right? Mm-hmm. And so when our child got to be about 3, everyone was asking us about nursery. Will your son be going to nursery? Is he going to nursery? And in this country, you don't put your child in nursery. unless both parents are working. And I had the ability to stay home. And so that wasn't the plan. But everyone was really, oh, it's free, but it's free, but it's free. So we ended up doing nursery just a few days a week. And after the first year, it became apparent that although the nursery was fine and there was nothing wrong with it, it was an issue when our son, in front of our entire family, said, and he was only, 3 or 4. And he said, Mom, do you know what I learned? That 2 girls can get married. And I thought, wow, at this age, this is already a subject. So I don't know how that came about, but that was kind of exacerbated my idea of, why are we doing this?
Yeah. I mean, that in nursery, that's entirely in line with the government's LGBT inclusive education policy, which is LGBT content in every subject at every age from nursery upwards. So that's not like a freak event that happened with some rogue teacher.
That's I don't know. The teacher was wonderful. Policy. I don't know who they had a few teachers, so I can't really blame one, but yeah.
Yeah. Now, someone's saying that. I won't bring the comment up because it's swearing in it.
Sure.
But someone's saying that the nurseries are just teaching kids the law, which is true. It is legally possible for 2 women to get married. Just to re-emphasize, the Scottish Family Party doesn't have a policy on same-sex marriage. But what would you say to that? They're just teaching them the law. What's your problem with them being taught the law?
I have no problem with them being taught the law, except for the fact that I personally am a Christian. So if someone is not a Christian, then that should be perfectly fine with them. What I don't like is with people pushing it. And what we're finding here in our country, I can't speak for the UK, but here I think it's an issue that is being brought up at way too young of an age. And it's being pushed. Children are being tracked towards that. It's not a, hey, this is an issue. It's, hey, this could be you. Is this you? And that's starting very early on. And we're seeing that. It's very common here.
Yeah. I'd say about that in nursery as well. I mean, I think it's a controversial issue. I mean, the majority of people in Scotland, probably in America as well, think that same-sex marriage is good, or there'll be a portion that don't care, but there's a substantial minority of people who think that's wrong. So to be deliberately presenting it in a positive light, people know full well that they're overriding the views of a substantial number of parents in doing that. So they're using the education system to present a message to children that they know is opposed to the beliefs of the parents. And I've got a problem with that. Now, if you're going to teach something controversial, you need to wait until the children are old enough to understand both sides.
100%.
And then you can introduce it. So, yeah, I mean, were there any other things in Scotland, or shall we head over to what you've experienced in America?
Well, we left shortly after that. So that was our area didn't have a private school. There was no Christian school. That was our only alternative. There was one other issue, but it wasn't really, I wouldn't say it was anything major, but that really kind of just locked in my head of, this isn't going to work for us. So we left shortly thereafter. It was not based on that one isolated incident, because we loved Scotland and we love the people. I don't want to give the wrong impression. We love it there. We miss it. But then we came to the United States, and my first thought was no public school. So we have not done public school since nursery in the UK. And so now we've done private Christian school ever since then. But it is public school is much different here, I think, than it is in the UK. It's it pushed forward with a tremendous amount of progressive ideology. I'm sure it's forthcoming where you are too, but I can only speak for the US at this point. Our child is going into 5th grade. Yeah.
Just before we hear a bit more about that, let's just answer this. Either you have the same issue if a teacher taught a 3-year-old that a man and woman can get married. No, because that's not controversial. There's no one who disagrees with that. That's not a controversial thing to teach, so that'll be fine. As I explained earlier, it's because it's controversial. I think it raises an issue. So if we can move on to, your experience in seeing things going on in the education system in America, and the involvement you've had in raising awareness of those things? Tell us a bit of that story.
Do you mean how I got involved?
Yes.
Well, I've always been very political, and I've been a Christian for the past 20 years. And I've seen a slow decline in morals and values. And of course, then when our child became of school age, I needed to see where that fell in education. We protected our child from a lot of this by putting him in private school. But then we started seeing that this was also going on in the public school as well. And you think, wow, well, my child is probably going to be okay from this. Indoctrination really is what's going on here, because that's really what we're talking about. And it became apparent that there are parents here that their children are seeing and experiencing like this critical race theory, and they're saying, hey, mom, I am black and white, and I don't want to be the white. How can I get rid of the whiteness? And these parents are shocked and horrified. And there's something to be said from any age, really, but more importantly, a young age, when a child is told he is a victim of something, or he is an oppressor of something.
Yeah. Just go about that. That was a mixed race child you're talking about.
Yes.
Saying that they want to get rid of the white bit.
Yeah.
They think that's bad. I mean, do you want to explain a bit more? I mean, critical race theory is running rampant in schools in Scotland. It's not something I've addressed particularly with this audience. It's on my list to look at a bit more closely. Do you want to sort of start from the beginning with that? What's that all about?
In American schools? We call it CRT, and it is widespread. I'm sure other people have found it and noticed it in schools way before we have, but in our particular area, so we're in Nashville, Tennessee, and it's a typically conservative area, very conservative, more conservative than in many other areas in the country. And we saw it really rampant here. And what the ideology is it's got Marxist roots. If you take it back, there's lots of different theories called critical theory, which is Marxist, and you can have different critical theories and different things. And in our country, it's critical race theory. And that's where they try to pit the races against each other. So if you can say to a white child, do you know that just by being white, you are oppressing a child that's black? These are kids that have never owned slaves, to have no idea. I mean, it is so illogical, but they are pushing this. They're pushing for children to apologize to children of other races just for being white. Because of course they're garnering this on the whole idea that our entire country is systematically racist, which I honestly just don't buy that, because we would never have elected a black president. Right now we have a black vice president. I mean, it just is so illogical that you couldn't make this up, to be honest.
There's no definition of the sort of systematic racism. So it can never be pinned down. You can never find exactly where it is. You can never define it. It's just like a campaigning term. So just what you're saying about like the oppressed oppressor thing. Basically, the way I sometimes see it is a large part of sort of left-wing political thought is the idea that the government's on the side of the little people who are getting a raw deal, which, that's fine. That could be a perfectly valid thing. But then the idea becomes, so the more people we can find who are getting a raw deal, then the more support we can get. So the more people we can persuade are oppressed, then the more people will support us. So if we're saying a group's oppressed, then another group must be the oppressor group. And we can persuade the oppressed group that the system's against them and it needs the government. We're going to be the government who's going to come in and rescue them from oppression. Now, that's a very persuasive sell. Now, of course, in some cases, it might be true. I mean, there might actually be groups that are oppressed, facing all sorts of persecution or whatever, and the government could step in and help. But I think the important thing to recognize is that for a certain section of the political spectrum, it's in their interest to create oppressed groups.
Yeah, it's in their interest to create the friction so that they can come in and be the savior of the people. That's kind of how I see their end game. Their end game in our country, I believe, and they've stated it in a myriad of different ways. Well, I don't want to say they've stated it. They've sort of stated it, is their ideal is to get rid of our freedoms and liberties and remove the Constitution. And they have done this by a child in a school. And of course, this is not all teachers. I'm painting this with a broadly stroked brush. But we have what you call activist teachers. Many teachers are just wonderful. So this is not every single teacher. But there are so many of them that are doing this. And they just have in their minds that that they're going to teach children that our founding fathers were oppressors. Now, granted, they were not perfect people, and some of them were slave owners, and we can all agree that that is not a good system. That was awful. No, I don't know a soul that thinks that was a great idea. But what they're doing is they're undermining the very foundations of what we stand on, which is freedom and liberty in the Constitution. And they are trying so hard to pull out the bottom of this so that they can say, see, the country is awful. We need a new system. And it's important to have a free system. And that's not what they want. They do not want a free system.
It's the same here. I mean, the equivalent people here, I mean, they love to criticize Churchill. I mean, Winston Churchill is probably the foremost historical hero in the United Kingdom. So he's their target to tar with any brush going and try and make out as a really terrible, awful man. It's not because they really care about Churchill. It's because they want to sort of tear down national identity.
Yeah.
They take any sense of pride in the nation. Because what they would prefer would be a sort of internationalism is their flavor. They want to have international bodies running things. It's a sort of form of empires, effectively, but they want to be handing over the national sovereignty because the nation is so bad. I came across something recently in Scotland as well, that the ideas portrayed this idea of like collective racial guilt. But if you're a white person, there's so much injustice in the past that you've got to bear some responsibility, and the scales need to be rebalanced now because you've benefited from all this. I heard someone pointing out, how many black people in America and in Britain, how many of them are descended from slave owners and slave traders as well? I mean, significant numbers.
Yeah. They don't talk about those things.
No, because the sort of Arab slave trade, and the slave trade run by Arabs, not with Arabs as slaves, was a very significant movement. And yet no one's suggesting that people of sort of Arabic descent have some sort of collective guilt. I mean, the transatlantic slave trade as well. I mean, the Europeans didn't go into Africa and like club people on the head and take them away. That they bought slaves from African slave traders. That was the usual thing. They like trade guns for them or whatever. So the Africans would enslave each other, and the Europeans would buy them at the slave trade market. So to try and make it into like a simple race thing, I mean, it makes no sense. But it doesn't need to make sense. The idea isn't to make sense. The idea isn't to interpret history, or it's to like you were saying, it's to cause division, isn't it? To cause a sense of guilt in one part of the population. And sort of victimhood in the other side. That's
exactly it. We say they go after every good thing. If you pick the good things that a society is comprised of, they have gone after every single good thing. So the institution of marriage, creation, man and woman, they've gone after creation with the whole trans movement. I mean, they've gone after education, which was once good. I mean, every single solitary good thing that a country is made up of, they've gone after it. Faith, family, marriage, church, they've gone after church. I mean, I could go on.
Yeah.
They just cut that down.
So in terms of schools, they're teaching the critical race. I say it's the same in Scotland. I've seen a letter that a lady sent to the government complaining that her, I can't remember, son or daughter was being taught this. And the reply from the government was basically, yep, that's what we're teaching. That's our policy. And I say they're producing lots of resources supporting that. So it is government policy
Hmm.
here to be teaching it.
Wow.
So what sort of pushback has there been in America
Well,
or locally to you?
well, sadly, and I don't know how much of the people in the UK are like Americans, but a lot of Americans just work and they don't pay attention to much of what's going on in the news. They just don't. So when you talk to them about CRT, they think, what on earth is that? Unless they're watching the news. I mean, if you're not paying attention, reading the paper or watching the news, you do not know about this. And I would say a lot of people are not aware of it. Now, when we first started, so I'm with Moms for Liberty, and we really have pushed back. I don't know if we've been the most active chapter or not. It sure feels like it sometimes. But we have put on large conferences in our town. We have invited the leaders of our city. We have invited parents, and we have done conferences to show people. We've flown in doctors who study this. One is a university professor who actually taught critical race theory on a university level, to talk about what she was taught to say and how one day she realized something is very, very wrong with this. So the Moms for Liberty is an organization that started in Florida, and it's branched out to pretty much all over the country. And we have pushed back tremendously. We have been called everything in the book. Our chapter chair, an absolutely wonderful warrior, a girl by the name of Robin Steenman. She has taken hits from the president of the United States. They have gone after us and called us everything, CNN, MSNBC, all because, but they have to cut and splice things that we've said to make it look like what we're saying is wrong when actually what we're saying is not wrong. But we've done these conferences. We've tried to educate the public. I think we've done a pretty good job considering that it's only been exactly 1 year. But there's just so much to do. Sometimes we feel like we're just up against a machine that just seems, it's like David and Goliath sometimes.
Well, from our perspective, we think it's amazing how much sort of parental rebellion there is. In the same, you said if people don't watch the news or don't read the newspaper, they won't know what's going on. In Scotland, even if they do watch the TV and read the newspaper, they still won't know what's going on.
Well, that's still here.
This issue will never be covered, never discussed.
Yeah. And that's kind of the same too. I have found that the most effective way to open people's eyes to what's going on is, and this is just the way it is, it's one-on-one. It's walking to your neighbor and saying, hey, look, I want to show you what's on my phone. Do you know that there is a Chromebook that all the third graders have in their class? It's got this book, and you let them see the porn that would make, I would not even read these pages from these books that we found in the children's libraries on this, because I would blush, as would you. But it's absolutely gobsmacking.
To have the problem that we have is sometimes you show people these things and they just say, don't believe you. You're making it up. You're exaggerating. That can't possibly be true. Do you have that?
That's why you have to show it to them. That's why it can't be hearsay.
Even when we show it to them, even when we show people.
Really?
Quite a few people, they start, even sometimes, like the politicians of the parties that implement this as their policy. Sometimes people have showed it to, they'll come and knock at the door. And one of our supporters will open the door and say, look, this is why I'm not going to vote for you. This is what your parties are having taught in schools. And the politicians say, no, it's not true.
Wow.
They're not lying. They just don't know.
Yeah.
They just don't know.
Yeah.
They're obviously wrong to be so confident when they actually haven't got a clue.
Yeah.
But they just don't. It's because it's not on the political agenda. Well, it's sort of on the fringe of it. We've managed to bring it onto the political agenda, just about, but it's certainly not a mainstream political issue. We're working on it, but it's not a mainstream political issue.
Yeah.
Just got a comment on here. Right. Good evening, Charles. So unfortunately, the kids go through school. They never learn about the aims of Marxism to destroy the West, and that destroying the family was part of that agenda.
Yeah. 100%.
Now, that's interesting. On our manifesto, used to make a reference to cultural Marxism, but we took out the term because we thought maybe it was a bit of a stretch because a lot of people are not familiar with it. But I think Marxism, in terms of trying to divide the world into oppressor and oppressed groups, claiming you're on the side of the oppressed, and then, well, the government's going to help you, or we need an uprising. But basically, we need to completely do away with the system that we've got and replace it with something completely different. I mean, that is the view of a lot of politicians, certainly the view of the Green Party, I would say, in a significant portion of the SNP. Though the SNP don't know what they think, they just get pushed along by the academics who do believe that. Destroying the family. Now, communism and the family is a bit of a complicated issue because initially they tried to throw out marriage, free abortion, fill in a postcard and you get divorced. They went down that road, but it was such a total, absolute disaster that they rode back on it, I think in the 1930s, and became actually quite conservative in terms of families. So it ended up that you'd end up with like some Catholic communicators saying, I wish we could value family as much as they do in the Soviet Union, which was quite a challenge to the United States. But yeah, that's an interesting issue. Thank you, Charles. So in terms of the critical race theory, I mean, I've seen quite a bit of parents pushing back against it. And I've also seen the news that some governors, senators, whatever, have got elected. And this has seemed to be one of their key policies that's cut through with the electorate. Is that fair?
You mean to agree to employ CRT in the schools or to not?
The ones who've opposed it.
Oh, yes. So Bill Lee, who is Tennessee's governor, has said that he will not allow it. But it's a tough thing because how do you control every single school and what goes on? If I'm a teacher and I'm going to teach CRT, I am still going to teach CRT. I'm still going to employ that in my classroom. And it would be very difficult to prove yay or nay unless you are literally sending home worksheets. And again, it's such a construct, really, because then you'd have to say, well, is this CRT in this worksheet? You know what I mean? Unless it says CRT worksheet, it's hard to really nail that, pin it down. But yeah, it's still going to happen, even though it's supposedly not able to happen here. It still happens for sure. And there's videos all over Facebook and YouTube of teachers that say, heck, I'm going to teach it anyway. I don't care. I'm excited to go and teach about CRT and all this stuff. So it really hasn't stopped anything, to be honest.
Near to where I live, there's a very big independent school, fee-paying school. So all the pupils in it, virtually all of them, will be from very wealthy households. And they made a video illustrating critical race theory and the idea of white privilege. So they had pupils, lining up, and they showed that the black pupil started at a disadvantage compared to the white pupil, which I think is just a terrible message. It's like saying to black pupils, whatever happens in life, you've had a raw deal. Whatever you achieve, wherever you got to, you would have achieved more if you weren't black. And saying to the white people, well, whatever you've achieved, it wasn't fair. You didn't actually deserve to do it well. But the thing that got me, it's talking about this white privilege. I mean, the black girl who was in this, back of the queue in these, discriminated against unprivileged position from a very wealthy family. And you think, are they really trying to tell her that she's a sort of huge disadvantage compared to boys not too far away who would be in much, much more difficult personal situations? I mean, you don't have to think about it for long, obviously, to realize this just doesn't make sense. This is not rational. But that's an independent school.
What a shame. Well, it's racist in nature to do that. What they don't see, the thing that boggles the mind, is that's actually judging people by the color of their skin, not by their character. And that in itself is actually racism and discrimination. So, but I just don't know how people can be so aloof as to not see what they're doing is actually what they're claiming other people are doing. It's logical.
I always think of Barack Obama. He's got a daughter, hasn't he? Is that right? Two daughters. So Barack Obama's daughters suffer from systematic racism?
Apparently, yes.
I mean, if you imagine that, I mean, if you apply for a job anywhere, I mean, you've got the golden ticket, haven't you? Everyone wants to employ Barack Obama's daughters. I mean, they could probably do anything and make a fortune anywhere. But we've got to believe that they're held back because of the race. They're discriminated against sort of systematically. Right, there's just a quick question here I would like to answer. Richard, what would you do if you had two dads? Well, I'm not sure you can have two dads. What would I do if I'd have two dads? I would miss my mum. How about that? Is that okay? Right. That's that question done. Right. So we talked about the race angle. What about the other issues here? Gender ideology? Has that been an issue local to you as well?
Oh, yes. It's all kind of wrapped up into one big heap of one big heap. So you've got a few different things going on at the same time, but all of what you talked about before I came on is exactly what we're dealing with. Teachers' first day of school, kids arriving, tell us what your pronouns are. So now we're just eliminating science. So now they go after science and things. It's so unbelievable. Sometimes it leaves me speechless, and rarely am I speechless. But yeah, there are children are getting worksheets to talk about what their preferred pronouns are. And here it can be interchangeable. So a child may feel like a boy one day and a girl the next day. And of course, whatever you feel is what they are going by on that day. So there's very little science involved with this, despite the fact that we've been taught X and Y chromosomes. It just is out the window. All of that is out the window. But kids are being taught from a very, very, very young age that it is something that your parents determine at some point, and it can change. So science doesn't determine if you're a boy or a girl. You can determine it, but your parents initially determine it, and you can change that. Yeah. I mean,
What I find frustrating is the number of people I think who are just weak. I mean, you've got activists who really believe this stuff, and it's their mission in life to promote it. But then you've got probably at least 60 or 70% of teachers, head teachers, school, educational managers, or whatever. They really don't care. They couldn't care less about it. They'll just do anything for an easy life. Yeah. If that's what they say, yeah, I'll do that. If that helps my career along, and I can just keep earning my money, and it all goes smoothly, I'll just go along with it. And there's not just teachers and head teachers, or whatever. That's that's politicians. Well. I'm sure if the wind changed direction, they would just turn on a dime, to use an American expression. They would just turn on a dime, and they're going in a completely different direction because they haven't got any personal conviction about this. It's just we've created a situation where it's in people's self-interest to toe the line, and once you do that, people toe it. I've just got another question from where's it gone? Another challenging question. God forbid using pronouns. Now, I mean, we weren't exactly saying we've got any problem with pronouns, the concept of pronouns. It's them being used as a sign of changing gender is the issue, which is pretty obvious, isn't it? So we're objecting to the idea of changing gender, which is embodied in choosing your own pronouns. So the suggestion that we're somehow objecting to pronouns full stop. Yeah. I mean, come on, you can do better than that, can't you?
If you
can do better, right?
Yeah, it's all about science.
And the sex education side, you mentioned some sort of pornographic materials. They were under the banner of sex education.
Well, just going. So we've got pornography in the schools. In many of the schools, we've got books that can be checked out. So this is not necessarily sex ed. I know that from a young age, shortly after I graduated, one of the practices they were doing in elementary school. So we're talking in the 80s, 90s, 80s, probably. They had small children putting rubbers on bananas. So,
Mhm.
I mean, why is a child needing to learn this? Is beyond my utter imagination, because they certainly shouldn't be doing anything that would involve
Yeah.
that. So why do they need to
Yeah.
know how to do it? So that was an issue, and the parameters have changed quite a bit in terms of, um, in order to have sex, it's just, you have to, anyone can do it. I remember how things were pretty regular and normal when I was in the 70s and 80s, when I was in elementary and high school. But it's changed. It's changed fundamentally, because now, instead of men and women being attracted, it's definitely, they take it that extra level, which is, now this is what gay
Mhm.
sex is. This is how you have gay sex. And by the way, if you've ever had this thought, if you've looked at a girl and you're a girl and you've ever found them attractive, there's a good chance you're gay. So they kind of take that and they
Mhm.
presume a lot. And now we're seeing a lot of, if you ever cue into Hillsdale College and any of their, like, Abigail Schreier is an expert on that
Mhm.
topic, how teachers are taking that and running it and just following it. And parents are finding out later on in the game that kids are, they've, a child has been told that they should be acting gay because the teacher feels that they're gay. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
that I fully
Yeah. And the
recommend.
whole thing. Sorry, go on. Yeah.
No, go right ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just going to say, with the whole sort of lesbian, gay, bisexual thing, I mean, it created a culture where it's almost assumed, sexuality is a spectrum. So,
Mhm.
there have been surveys in Britain that showed a majority of 16-year-olds say they're not exclusively heterosexual. So they're regarding this heterosexual or homosexual. They're somewhere in the middle. So they're regarding this as a sort of open question, which road they're going to go down. But they're not provided with the information. I mean, the facts are homosexual relationships are less stable. They correlate with all sorts of emotional, mental, physical health problems, addictions, whatever. There's relationship instability. So people really need to know those things before they're making a choice. Similarly with sexual practices as well. Some are very dangerous,
Mhm.
and some are not. But all that information is just completely hidden, completely obscured, and the message presented is just, "Hey, there's all these great options for you. Just whichever you feel like, go for it." That's really irresponsible. They don't provide the information that young people need to make an informed decision. And I bet the people who write the resources are completely unaware of the facts. Like if we were saying, are you aware of the fact that, for example, gay and lesbian relationships are less stable, particularly if the children come into them, tend to become even more unstable. I would imagine they'd say, didn't know that, or don't believe you, whatever.
Mhm.
But these are the key facts, aren't they? This is what people need to know. That's
Yeah.
what we think. All right, who
Yeah,
got it?
definitely.
Why are you making things up now? You're going to do some research, Daniel. Go onto the internet, do some research over the things I've just said. Let's say there's stability of different types of relationship. Go and find some statistics and see what you find. Okay. Just to say, we've got a few customers who are commenting with challenging comments, shall we say. If any of you would like to come onto the live stream to have a discussion about some of these over the next few weeks, we would be very happy to arrange that. If you email contact@scottishfamily.org, contact@scottishfamily.org, we can see if we can set that up for you to come on, like a chat show. You could come on for a little while and we could have a little chat. Now, I make that offer to lots and lots of people. Quite a few people initially take it up, but when it comes to actually appearing on screen and defending their views in open debate, they're not so keen and they tend to fade away. But if any of you wanted to come on and do that, I would be more than happy to consider that. Contact@scottishfamily.org. So what's the state of play in America? I mean, is the pushback being effective? Are these
Yes, it
things in
has.
retreat, or is it a mixed picture around the nation?
Um, I would say, well, I think it depends on your area and the number of people that you have supporting your mission.
Mhm.
So, we're in a very conservative area, and we found that our area has really kind of been asleep on this issue. We've only really come aware of it in the past year. The majority of people. There were people who sounded an alarm a year ago, a year before this, and I kind of thought, not a big deal. My kid's in private school, and I think that's probably what some people think. Like, oh, sorry, that's not my kid. But then it became apparent, you know what, there's a bunch of kids in these public schools, and this is the garbage that they have to listen to. Then I started thinking, well, maybe this is my fight because we're blessed in the area of doing private school and I do have the time, I can stand up for the parents who are afraid to speak. And I'm usually typically not, I'm a natural person to push back on things. That's sort of how I'm wired. So I would say we've been very effective, but we just have so much more work to do. We have taken an area called, our country is broken into states and then counties and cities and counties, and we're in Williamson County. And Williamson County has, it's very conservative. And when people started seeing this, they were horrified. In fact, I think that even some of the people asking the questions, who have posed questions up on the screen here, I think that they really just kind of they just don't know, because if they did know, the majority of people are really shocked at it. They really are just like, my goodness, I had no idea. They think it's not real, or no, a school would never allow this to happen. And the truth is they do. And it's our job, once we see it, is to let them know, hey, you're choosing to either stay silent and fearful, or do these kids some justice and step up and say, you know what, this is not right. This is not right at all.
Yeah. I completely agree with your stance there. There's not just a matter of looking after our own kids. I find myself quite often saying that to people. People get in touch with the family party and they want to know how they can protect their kids from what's going on at the school down the road, which is perfectly valid. Absolutely. We'll try and help people with that. And parents are inevitably going to be concerned. But we also say, what about everyone else's kids?
Yeah.
When it comes to election day, are you going to vote for a party that's going to impose this on the whole nation in the way that's already happening?
Yeah, I think it's so true. Will there be a spot, Richard, that people can go? Maybe is it just the page where they can go onto Facebook pages, and I can make recommendations, and they can go and just see pages of what this looks like in our country. And because I think a lot of people possibly, I know still a lot of people here, and I know probably more there, possibly are not aware, and we can give examples of what it looks like. This is what it looks like. So when you see things that come home from school and it resembles this, or it's of this nature, you can go, this is what they're trying to do here.
We can certainly share some links on our social media. I've just got another question here. Have I ever explored my sexuality? Absolutely. And it led in a straight path towards marrying my lovely wife, having 2 sons who were brought up by their mum and dad. So yeah, that was really fantastic. I'd recommend it to anyone. I assume that's what you meant, Daniel. So there we are. Okay, well, Lee, thanks very much for joining us. It's been fascinating to hear a little bit about what's going on over there. We do hear quite a bit about what's going on in America. You probably didn't hear so much about what's going on in Scotland, but similar issues, partly because they're coming from international bodies as well. Like the sex education thing comes from the World Health Organization or the UN, etc. So these are international issues, and we're often encouraged by seeing the fight back in the United States, and we're hoping we're maybe a few years behind, but we're going to build up to that sort of strength of resistance.
Well, we can help you, give you ideas, and that's kind of what we do. So we're happy to help in whatever way we can to help wake people up.
Yeah, and that's the key thing, isn't it? To wake people up. There's a lot of people who'd be horrified if they knew, and we need to make sure that they know. Right, thanks everyone for watching. Thanks for the comments. That's been interesting. I've been reading most of them. We've had a chance to reply to a few. Let me tell you who's on next week. Next week is Stuart Wayton. Stuart Wayton, the sociologist at Abertay University. Always an interesting character. We'll agree on almost everything and maybe disagree about one issue. That's what we normally do. So tune in next week, next Tuesday at 9 o'clock to hear from Stuart. But thanks, Lee, and thanks to all of you.
Thank you.
And see you next week.